I want to ramble a little bit about names and certain kinds of names. Yeah. Being named after a loved one, a family member, a relative, a special person who has passed away, being named after them in like remembrance or to honor them or carry some sort of legacy or whatever. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, that's really wholesome and really nice and sweet. It's a really nice and wholesome and sweet thing to do. But I've always feel kind of, weird about it. Because my middle name is Leonard. It's my grandpa's name, and I was named that. Was given that middle name to, probably to remember him or honor him or whatever. And yeah, I always found it kind of weird. Like, and I always felt like I wasn't really honoring him by having that name, living my own life and doing my own things. Really wasn't honoring him in any sort of way. Wasn't really living up to having that as a middle name. I really didn't deserve to have the same middle name, or have that as my middle name, the same name. I didn't really deserve it. I always felt like I always felt weird about it, and I always wondered if anyone else feels like that. Anyone else who is named after a loved one, a relative, a family member, or anyone else special that has passed away and who has been named that to honor, remember, or in remembrance, or to carry not carry, but to further some sort of legacy or whatever. I've always wondered if anyone else feels that way, like they don't deserve to be named that. Like they're not really living up to that name, or they're not really living up to that person's memory. That's really what it is. I feel like I just don't live up to that memory of him. I actually don't remember him at all because he passed away before I was ever born. So yeah. So I feel like I just don't live up to that memory at all of him. I don't live up to the name, even as a middle name. So I always wondered if anyone else feels like that. Or am I just a weirdo? Another thing about names, or certain names, biblical names. Yeah. Being named after something, or someone, I should say, in the Bible. Like being named after a book in the Bible, or an important person in the Bible. Yeah. I never liked them. I still don't like biblical names. Names like John, or Mary, or Joseph, or Matthew, or Paul, or Peter. Names like that. And even my own name, Daniel. Yes. I am named after a person in the Bible, a book in the Bible. Yes, and I've never liked it. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with those names in a general sense. They're all fine and perfectly valid names to have and to name someone. But, I just never liked being associated with the Bible, a book in the Bible, a person in the Bible. Every time, I'm always associated with that, just by having that name. I just never liked it. I never liked being always associated with it. Especially if I introduce myself to a religious person, that's the first thing they latch onto. My name, my biblical name. They always, talk about that book in the Bible, and even hell, how many times they've told the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Good Lord, I've heard that story so many times. It's just annoying. And maybe this is just the fact that I'm a non-religious person. I don't know. But even back when I was a religious person and considered myself a Christian and went to church and everything, like when I was like a kid and a little bit into my teenage years, even back then, every time I introduced myself to someone at, say, church or something, they would always, it would always be brought up. My name, the book in the Bible, the story of Daniel in the lion's den. It was always the first thing they latched onto. And even back then, even as a Christian or whatever I was back then, it still kind of annoyed me, that was always the first thing. I was always associated with that. And yeah, it's just annoying. I've always been annoyed by it. I've always never really liked having a biblical name that much at all. And yeah, I can't even imagine having a little bit more biblical name, like the names I mentioned. I can't even imagine how they feel. They probably feel the same way, unless they're religious themselves. And then if they're religious themselves, they're probably not bothered by it. But if they're like a non-religious person, or maybe a totally different religion than Christianity, they're probably, just as bothered by it as I am. They're probably annoyed being constantly associated with someone's or a book in the Bible or something from the Bible. They're probably constantly bothered and annoyed by it. I can't even imagine being named Jesus. That's even another thing. Like having the name Jesus and being a non-religious person or a person of another faith other than Christianity. Being named Jesus, I can't even imagine how annoying that would be. Walking up to a religious person and saying, "Hey, my name's Jesus." And constantly say, "Oh, that's a cool name," or and going on and then praising that name and everything, or whatever they have to deal with. I can't even imagine how annoying that is. But yeah, I just never really liked being associated with someone, a story in the Bible, someone in the Bible, a book in the Bible. I never really liked having a biblical name. And I bet other people probably feel the same way. I don't know, though. I might, again, be the weirdo in this situation. I don't know.